In 1983, Richard Petty was caught in what seemed like one of NASCAR's craziest cases of cheating, which later involved his win, a fine, and a points deduction, and a decision by NASCAR that has been debated for decades. Richard Petty is more than a 7-time Cup champion, with more than 200 wins. He's more than the cowboy hat, the sunglasses, the STP blue and red number 43, and my favorite character in Disney's movie Cars. To many fans who grew up in the 1970s, Richard Petty is NASCAR. And this is the story of the day Richard Petty was caught breaking the rules and still got to keep the trophy, and the bigger questions it raised about cheating in NASCAR. Before we get to Charlotte in 1983, there's one thing you need to understand about NASCAR in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, and likely still today. Everyone pushes the rulebook. Teams don't just try to be faster, they try to be smarter. Back then, mechanics experimented with questionable engine tolerances, lightweight bodywork, creative aerodynamics, and parts that were legal until tech found out how to measure them correctly. Smokey Yunick became one of the most notorious figures in NASCAR's early era of rule bending, not because he was the first to cheat, but because he turned it into an engineering craft. He was a brilliant mechanic and crew chief who believed the rulebook only limited what was written and not what was implied. His cars were famous for clever, hard-to-detect tricks such as oversized fuel lines that acted like hidden gas tanks, acid-thin body panels to reduce weight, and subtle aerodynamic changes that inspectors usually never noticed. He didn't try to hide his reputation either. He openly viewed the innovation as creative or interpretation, and it was just a part of racing. Whether celebrated as a genius or condemned as a cheater, he helped define NASCAR's Wild West garage culture that set the tone in the 1970s and 80s. This was pretty normal across the garage. Former crew chiefs from that era, including some who worked for Petty Enterprises, later admitted that the attitude back then was simple. NASCAR's inspection isn't what it is today, and engineering was advancing faster than enforcement. And many of the sport's greatest innovations were born in this gray area. Richard Petty wasn't known as a cheater, but he was known as a competitor, and in 1983, the competitive edge finally crossed the line. During the 1970s and 80s, NASCAR existed in a gray area where innovation and rule bending often overlapped, and teams believed that real competition started before the green flag. Cheating wasn't always blatant, but it was about finding loopholes in the rulebook and stretching interpretations. One common tactic involved engines that mysteriously made more power than they should have. Teams built engines a little bit over the legal displacement by using tricks like offset boring, thin wall cylinder sleeves, or special pistons that allowed the engines to pass a casual inspection. Aerodynamics were a whole other battlefield. Some teams experimented with flexible body panels and bending sheet metal, so that at speed the cars would squat, reducing drag or increasing downforce. We actually saw this a few years ago on Kevin Harvick's car in modern times. Others were using acid-dipped bodies, which is when the body panels would be soaked in acid to reduce weight while keeping the stock appearing shape. NASCAR eventually started weighing cars more carefully because of this trend. Even details like roof textures, hidden spoilers, or reshaped fenders became part of the arms race just to gain a fraction of a second per lap. Fuel and weight tricks were also legendary in this era. Teams were known to hide extra fuel in the frame rails, roll cages, or by using oversized fuel lines, allowing them to stretch fuel mileage during long green flag runs. Weight-related cheats including ballast that could be dropped or moved during the race, for example, hiding lead blocks that could be released after inspection to make the car lighter. Some stories even describe filling the cars with sand or water during inspection, and then shedding it before the race to hit a lower weight. Perhaps the most famous saying in NASCAR is, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. A lot of people believe that every team cheated during this era, and I guess we'll never know because a lot of teams never got caught. But that changed in 1983 at the Miller High Life 500 at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Richard Petty was chasing his 199th career victory. The race turned into a classic Petty performance. He was smooth, consistent, and fast all day. Richard Petty won the race, and that's when the real drama started. During the post-race inspection, NASCAR officials took a closer look at the engine inside of the number 43 Pontiac, and what they found shocked the rest of the garage. The engine measured 381 cubic inches. At the time, the legal limit was 358. Petty's car wasn't slightly out of tolerance. It was massively oversized. And if that wasn't enough, NASCAR also discovered that the team had installed mismatched tires by using a different compound on the left side of the car without approval. The engine was illegal, the tires were illegal. These were two clear violations in the same race. And it wasn't something that could be explained by something like a measurement error or bad luck. So NASCAR had to act. NASCAR handed out the biggest penalties in history at the time: a $35,000 fine, 126 driver points, crew chief Billy Hagan was fined, and 2 crew members were suspended. But here's where the controversy truly began, because after all of that, Petty got to keep the trophy. The record books still count it as his 199th victory. For many fans and fellow racers, this didn't sit right. If the car was illegal, why did the win still count? Some critics believe that NASCAR was afraid to erase a win from their biggest star. Others pointed out that race officiating was inconsistent in that area. After Charlotte, some fans began to look backwards. If Petty's car had been that far out of spec once, had it happened before? Were his 198 other victories all fraudulent too? Mechanics from rival teams claimed that in the 1970s, Petty Enterprises, like many top teams, experimented with acid-etched engine blocks, thin-wall pistons, and lightweight sheet metal. These technically weren't illegal, and they were extremely hard to catch at the time, to be fair. They live in a strange space between rumor and folklore, the same place where half of NASCAR's greatest legends have come from, and the reality is, Petty drove in an era where bending the rules was just a part of the game. He was hardly alone, but Charlotte 1983 became the moment the myth cracked. For the first time, a hero looked human, as NASCAR finally punished him. Some drivers from past decades believed that top names received slightly more leniency in inspection, while smaller teams felt like they were penalized harder. NASCAR has always denied that, and likely always will, but the perception remains. And this conversation didn't end here. Even in the modern era, fans have debated whether powerhouse teams sometimes get to operate closer to the line than others. One name that comes to mind with this is Jimmy Johnson. He was my favorite driver growing up, but him and Chad Knaus were incredible innovators, one of the greatest crew chief and driver combinations in NASCAR history. But they were penalized many times across their championship run, such as at Talladega when Chad Knaus told Jimmy to crack the back of the car if he won the race. We don't know what that car was hiding, but they definitely got penalized for that. Some fans claim that NASCAR favored them still. And do you really think that NASCAR would void a win from a Championship 4 driver today? Or do you think they would have stripped Jimmy's 7th championship even if the car was illegal? Personally, I kind of doubt that. So what does this all mean for Richard Petty's legacy? Did Charlotte tarnish it? Probably not. If anything, it made it seem more human of him. NASCAR still penalized him, even if they hadn't done it before. He was just someone who wanted to win badly enough to push the limits, just like everyone else in that era. The only difference? He was probably better at it than most of them. Petty's story isn't about cheating, it's about the culture of NASCAR in the early decades, a time when innovation and rule bending lived side by side. And whether or not you agree with NASCAR's decision that day, Charlotte in 1983 remains one of the most fascinating moments in racing history. If you enjoy stories like this, please consider subscribing as it really helps this channel grow. And let me know in the comments, did NASCAR make the right call in 1983? Should Richard Petty have kept the win, or should it have been erased?